Okay, good.
For your help with us doing it. Carmen.
I would like to start the tourism committee meeting with,
Thing I've been working on.
phone meeting to order. And I need a motion to approve the minutes for the May 21st meeting. Okay, Supervisor Strainer and Supervisor Stroud.
You get rainy weekend people.
Is there any questions about the minutes? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next, I'll open the meeting up for privilege of the floor and public comment. Is there anybody who would like to make a comment? No? Hearing none, we'll move on. There are no action items at this meeting today, so we'll move on to discussion items. The tourism director is going to present her quarterly.
Before I do the report, I'm gonna just give a quick update on some of the projects that we've been working on internally in our office. Make sure I don't knock this podium over. So a couple of things. First and foremost, the supervisors met with various members of the public, which in my eyes were received very positively. And I would encourage and ask, and I can facilitate to make sure that we do that maybe a biannual timeframe, quarterly, something of that nature, so that it's important that we hear from them, because sometimes not all of us can hear and sit every day. I have no issues, and I want to encourage each of you that if you hear something or have questions, I have no problems, concerns, reaching out and meeting with various folks about the projects that we're working on. So please use me as a resource. About a week and a half later from that, or maybe it was a week ago, I feel like it was just yesterday, but it was 2 weeks ago that this happened. We completed a Destination Sherpa program that we're working on. Is basically a 10-year plan for visitation in the Lake George area. And part of that started with Josiah Brown. That's who we hired to lead this project for us. It's going to be a 6 to 9 month project. And part of it started with a presentation from him to the committee, talking about the impact that tourism plays on destinations, and the importance of how we put it through, or how we put ourselves forward towards visitors. So then we met 2 weeks ago with about 24 stakeholders. And part of this project, first and foremost, I'd like to thank each and every one of those stakeholders. They gave up almost a full day of their time to walk through a very unique and out of the box way of being strategic about who we are as a destination, and where we need to go as a destination. We had some very strong leaders in that room, that it was very difficult to kind of follow this out of the box thinking. But at the end of the process, it was an eye opener. It let us identify what we need to do as a destination. And without giving it all away, we're still working through some things. It really comes down in line to what has been having and transpiring in conversations and other studies, that we really need to recognize our residents first, our businesses, and then our visitors. And really the reason behind that is because our visitors want to travel where the residents have fun. And the residents are our ambassadors to our destination. So there's more to come on that, but it's really moving forward in the strategic direction that we want to go in. That is just a second piece of what took place. And then the next day, thank you, Sasha and Christine Power. Sasha, Adirondack Winery, both of them gave up not only a first day, but a second day to be a part of the second part of the strategic session that really drove down deeper of how we are going to accomplish this roadmap that we have created the day before. This will be presented to all of you once it's all culminated and pulled together. But I wanted to let you know that there are pieces of the puzzle that are being put together to put us in a better light and position us as a destination that visitors want to come or want to come back to or want to explore someplace new. And really the avenues of doing that is empower our residents to really own the area that we live in and want to welcome those visitors, empower our businesses with the tools that they need to service these residents and the visitors, and then encourage visitors to come because this is the place that they want to be. And so that cyclical place. So I'm excited to share that with you all. Sorry, I don't have the big map and everything. It's still all being worked on. And there will be presentations along the way. So I wanted to give you that update from the prior committee meeting. And so any questions on that particular piece of the projects that tourism is doing here for this? Awesome. Hearing none, perfect timing. I'm going to take you to the agenda on page 1 is just what you see up there, which is a quick overview. So part of the contract changes that we made with Rove Marketing. Rove Marketing is our agency of record that houses all of our data that we buy. And then what they do is they're now tasked to analyze this data for us and put it into quarterly reports. So again, this was why I so quickly made sure that we understood receivables and the timing, and because some of this may look the same and some of it is going to totally not look the same. This is actual activity that's happening within the first quarter. So looking at page 4, so the insights for the key insights. So 2/3 of our visitors, and again, this is mobile devices, to Warren County were slated in Q1 of 2024. The share of out-of-state versus in-state visitors remains slightly consistent between 24 and 25 of Q1. Within state, half of the visitors originated from Albany, followed by 1/3 from New York City and the metro area. Half of those visitors to Warren County stayed overnight in Q1 of 2025, which is slightly over Q1 of 2024. And while hotel revenues comprise about 85% of total occupancy than 2024, short-term rentals, as we've seen, outperformed hotels across nearly all metrics in Q1 of 2025 compared to the prior year. So the hotel revenue and the average daily rate and the occupancy tax revenue were up about 2% in Q1 2025. If I can just be clear, to me, it's flat. You know, it's not a large increase, and we're hearing that from our businesses as well. And in Q1 compared to 2024, the 2% in Q1 2025 was compared to Q1 2024. Hotel occupancy rate was up slightly as well. Again, very flat. And then right now, the way we purchase, STR was bought out by CoStar. But at the moment, we do not have all the bells and whistles of CoStar to be able to really look and compare by zip code to zip code. So we have to look at it right now as an upstate New York region. And so we use that in comparison to the metrics. For example, Warren County hotel metrics were below the regional growth for Q1 2025 as compared to Q1 2024. And all of this, we will go into details. These are just the highlights. Moving over to page 5, when we look at total visa spending in 24, we reached nearly $620 million, down 3% from 2023. Visitors contributed to nearly half, 46% of total spend in 2024. We have access to residential data as well. So when we get visa data, we will see not only the residential spend, but the visitor spend. And we have that ability to pull out the resident spend and look deeper into the visitor spend. And approximately half of the visa visitor spending was restaurants, dining, and retail. The areas of Albany, New York City, and South Glens Falls contributed to more than half of 55% of visitor spending in 2024. That is true. It's not, we kept seeing Glens Falls fall out in our analytics, realizing that they were pulling the zip code of South Glens Falls. So we had to make sure. So it is there. The Albany, New York City, and South Glens Falls contribute to 55% of the visitor spend in 24. And visitor spend declined to 24 from nearly all top origin markets, but declined the most from Boston, while Rutland, Vermont was flat. Total visa spending in Q1 of 2025 reached 115 million, which is down from Q1 2024. Similar to 24, resident spending contributed to 63% of the total spending in Q1 2025. It's, that says a lot because our visitation is down. Our residents are going to pick up most of the total cost from a percentage standpoint. But for the last 2 years, the first quarter visa spend contributed to 20% of the total spend, while Q3 contributed to 1/3 of the total. Again, that makes sense because of summer being in Q3. With the exception of Rutland, which was up 4% the first quarter of this year, visitor spending has declined from all major markets in Q1 of 2025. To give you an idea of why this is significant from a marketing standpoint, this tells me that the marketing that we're doing, we're looking deeper and closer at that market to see what is working and what's not working, and maybe hit them harder depending on the conversion, which we're seeing conversion based on what we're running. And then for the last insight on page 5 is for the first quarter of 2025, domestic visitor spending by market segment was similar to last year, with the exception of increased spending on restaurant and dining and entertainment, while spending on fuel, grocery, food, and grocery declined. Going to page 6. Now I'm going to read this entirely, but this is the what we apply for or subscribe to Azera. It's the mobile location visitor study, and very layman's terms, this is tracking data from your cell phone. It's opt-in. And so you as the user of that phone have to opt in. So I always tell everyone to look at this data holistically and not by numbers. So for example, if it says 80% of those are, hanging out or going to the Holiday Inn, because Vinny, you looked at me just a second ago. But you don't want to let's say our numbers are 1,000. But you know that Vinny had a great event and there was more than that. You can't look at those numbers and say that there were only 1,000 people. You got to look at the 80% because that's based on overall. Everyone's got to opt in. Everyone has to decide whether they want that. Some block it, some don't accept it. So it's more of a direction. And so when I say that, so that when we go through the data coming up, starting on page 7, we're going to look at the Q1 summary and just basically this is looking at Q1 from January to March in all of Warren County. 2/3 of the visitors defined by mobile device detections were from in-state in Q1 of 2025, consistent with Q1 last year. So looking at the bar to the left, then looking at the one on the right, the share of the Canadians declined slightly, but remain less than 1% of mobile sampling. So just to show, I know there's the conversation about the Canadian market. I did look 2024 spending. The Canadians spent only 3% of those total dollars that we received in 2024. I know that's not the conversation here, and you're not seeing those numbers here, but I wanted to put that in context. That's why you're seeing very limited and small bars from 24 and 25 at the top, which is orange. Then looking at page 8 and going on to the share of overnight visitors. Again, these are mobile. Overall visitation detected from mobile devices stayed overnight in Warren County in 2025 is slightly down from 2024. Then out-of-state visitors likely to stay overnight declined more than in-state visitors in Q1, while the Canadians increased their likelihood. So looking at this, you've got the in-state, 55% versus 51% of this year. Out of state, 56%, 24 versus 49% this year. And international is 58% last year versus 49%. I want to make sure that you understand that just because 58 is higher than the in-state and out-of-state, that doesn't mean that international was higher than all the other two. That's not what this is saying. This is just looking at in-state, out-of-state, and international as each of those entities. Going on to page 9. So now we're still looking at mobile insight. Overnight visitors based on their market of origin. And again, this is overnight visitors. Albany Warren County Visitors Market of Origin for both in-state and out-of-state overnight visitors based on mobile device sampling remain consistent between 24 and 25. Within the overnight in-state origin market, which make up 2/3 of the total, nearly half from Albany, followed by 1/3 originating from New York City Metro. Very similar to what we see as a trend base. Out of state, overnight visitors were largely from the Northeast region, while nearly 3 in 10 originated from neighboring New Jersey. Again, no big ahas here. We have seen Florida come up a little bit in our numbers, but a lot of that is due to the marketing that's being done. Then the final piece of mobile insight is on page 10, and this is the popularity of attractions. And so one of the attractions included in the mobile device sampling for Warren County is the factory outlets of Lake George. This includes all of the entities purchased, or all the entities owned, even the multiple owners within the factory outlets of Lake George. So I don't want you to think they're segmented. We include them as one location because the visitors don't recognize them as multiple owners. So they remain the most popular place as defined by mobile devices in Q1 24 versus 25. The share of visitors detected at the Lake George Battlefield Park notably increased in 2025, with the share seen at Six Flags Great Escape and the Lodge declining. This is again first quarter. This is where the Canadian market hit you're seeing right now. Although we didn't get hit holistically, some of our businesses got hit hard. And so they were one of our ones hit by that decline in travel. The Lake George Battlefield Park has the highest share of repeat visitors, while visitors are staying longer, an average of 3 hours or more in Six Flags Great Escape and Lodge. Honestly, you can tell the difference. Why? Six Flags Great Escape is an area that you need to stay longer than a couple of hours. So that looks at the data from a mobile perspective. Going on to accommodations trends, AirDNA, STR, or CoStar is how we measure our short-term rental visitation and and how our performances of our lodging through STR and CoStar. Going to page 12, and again looking at the summary, and this gives more details of our key insights. While hotels comprise approximately of 75% of total accommodation revenue and 85% of accommodation demand in 24, short-term rentals outperformed hotels across all metrics in 25 compared to the prior year, particularly total revenue, occupancy tax, and occupancy rate. Then looking at short-term rentals, the average daily rate is nearly 2.5 times higher than hotels. Makes sense because more people you can fit into a short-term rental. This is likely due to the fact that they tend, I just reiterated anecdotally what that comment just said. They tend to have larger properties to fit more rooms. So the chart is very self-explanatory, looking at revenue, average daily rate, occupancy, and bed tax. My apologies, meant to change bed tax to occupancy tax. Bed tax is how Rove views it. I've been having them change our reports to be our terms and not their terms. Skip that one. So moving on to page 13, now we're going to look at the trends and look at the trends January, February, March, hotel versus short-term. Both hotels and short-term rental revenue was up in 25 compared to 24, with the contribution of short-term rental regional growth growing slightly, now presenting 32% of the total revenue of 24, the total revenue of 24. So again, we know that although, and this is where I want to make sure that we understand what is being reported from the treasurer's perspective from receivables versus that of which is being reported from actuals. And we're flat. Honestly, we're flat across the board, no movement. Might be slightly 1%, 2%, but honestly, it's flat across the board. Going on to page 14, again with accommodation trends, just looking at hotels. So breaking this out is the hotel average daily rate. The average daily rate in Q1 is trending similarly, but yet slightly higher compared to 24. And then for the full 2024 year, the average daily rate was 161, peaking in August at 233. Again, on par with trends and the time frame of when things increase and decrease. Looking at page 15, looking at year-over-year occupancy trends, hotel occupancy for Q1 25 was nearly identical to 24, averaging 37%. For the full year of 24, occupancy rate averaged 49%, again peaking in August at 73%. Continuing with the hotel trends and doing a year-over-year of occupancy tax on page 16, at a 4% rate, total hotel occupancy tax for Q1 25 was 2% above 24, yet the first 3 months of the year made up just 10% of total occupancy tax revenue in 24. So half of the full year's hotel occupancy tax revenue was generated in June, July, and August. Again, very much on par with trends of what we've seen in the past. And then finally, we're going to look at the regional hotel trends on page 17. And there is a map on this page on the right-hand side that again identifies the region of upstate New York, which is what we can currently review right now on the analytics. Later, we'll be able to look at comparison down to the zip code. So compared to upstate New York region, Warren County hotel metrics are slightly below the regional's growth in Q1 of 25 compared to Q1 of 24. While the average daily rates were comparable across the county and the region, Warren County's occupancy rate was lower than the region's. And this is as of May 29, 2025. And the reason they wanted to show this is more in comparison of year-over-year change. Normally, we'd look at a quarter, but I've asked for the year-over-year change based on the time that this presentation was given to us. Then moving on to page 18. And we're going to look at the Visa spend. So we have access to the Visa data. Again, this is just Visa's credit card spend. And we get this both domestically and internationally, and we get it both in resident and visitor. And moving on to page 19 to break this down, Q1 summary, looking at the domestic, total Visa spending in Q1 of 25 reached 115 million, which is down 2% from Q1 24, and visitor spend was down 5% compared to 24. Similarly, in 24, resident spending contributed to 60% of the total spending in Q 2025. But for the last 2 years, first quarter Visa spending contributed to 20% of the total spend, while Q4 contributed to 1/3 of the total. So if history continues to go in the same direction, we can assume that 20% of our Visa spend dollars are received in this first quarter. Then we move on to page 20, excuse me, and we're going to look at the origin of market for the visitors. And looking at, again, our top 3, no surprise, Albany, South Glens Falls, and New York City. With the exception of Rutland, which grew 4% the first quarter of the year, Visa spend has declined in all major markets of 25. Again, this is looking at the trends and looking at the number of visitors. When the number of visitors go down, obviously the spending is going to go down. Rutland is our star winner and has actually received more of our advertising dollars, and that's why you see it in that particular instance. Looking at page 21, now looking at the visitor spend by category, this is the dining, the retail, the food, etc. Nearly half of the domestic Visa visitor spending was in restaurants and dining or retail categories in Q1, similar to 24. For the first quarter 25, domestic visitors spent by market segment was similar to last year, with the exception of increasing spend on restaurant and dining, entertainment, while spending on fuel, food, and grocery declined. Entertainment comprised of 3% of the total visitor spending in Q1 2025. Others include cash withdrawal, hotel and lodging, and drugstores. I do want to point out that in the Visa study, you will most likely not see hotel and lodging as a top expenditure. And many people book their hotels online, And therefore that transaction is made where they're making that transaction, i.e. their home, and it doesn't count as an in-county expense. It's only where their Visa card was swiped. And so that's why when you look at these numbers and you look at the hotel, you won't see that as high in the numbers because the majority of usually hotels or even the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals require prepayment before your arrival.
So,
Yes, Vinny. Sorry.
so you're saying that most of them are made on the platform and not,
Correct. And if it was on a platform like an Expedia, I believe that the entire cost of that is required up front. So that is not reflective in the Visa data only.
okay.
But we still can collect those numbers because we get it through CoStar and STR.
A majority of our guests pay, the full, at check-in, right there at the counter.
So yours is different, but what if somebody paid
don't
through
know.
Expedia?
Some
they
of them
have to
do.
pay for it
Some of
upfront.
them do. Some of them are prepays. Absolutely. Some of them are prepays. But not the majority. I'm just very surprised that that number doesn't reflect on here. I am.
It is across the board on other destinations.
that
That you
right?
could,
Yeah.
yes, because you're not seeing that it's where basically where the card is swiped.
Right.
And finally, on the last page here in 22, we're going to look at the entertainment for visitor spending and basically break that down. Top entertainment spending category was recreational services for Q1 24 and 25. So Q1 25 experienced notable visitor spending increase in video game arcades, theater, tourist attractions, sports recreation clubs, public golf courses categories compared to 24. Recreational services are defined by Visa as merchants providing a wide variety of recreational entertainment services that require active physical participation. That is how Visa breaks those dollars down. We cannot steer that off. It's about how they put and categorize the Visa spend. And so, for example, mini golf, ski slopes, skating rinks, public swimming pools, shooting ranges, etc., are examples of what they put in as a recreational service. So that is the report for Q1. Not as exciting as we'd like, but based on trends across other destinations, we're faring about the same. And hoping that in seeing what we're seeing trending right now is an uptick, which is good because that's where we want to start towards our summer vacation. Any questions?
Supervisor Gerasi?
Yeah, okay, Evan, thank you very much. This is very informative and appreciate your work and whoever else in the staff contributed to really a lot of terrific information. Two questions. I think this report points to an important reason what the treasurer's office is doing with short-term rentals, that we need to double our efforts on it. I mean, the competition to our hotels is astounding to me. And is the 70% rate in July, is that normal? Is that low? I mean,
70%
occupancy rate.
Yeah, I had commented on that at a couple meetings ago that, even a strong hotel in the month of July is 70 to 75% and got, 75, that's it. That's it. I mean, there's room in July. Yeah, that's correct. August is different.
Thank you.
Supervisor Strainer?
None of this adds campground attention. So when Supervisor Wild was asking the treasurer to add the sales tax into that report that you were giving about that would take into account campers spending too, wouldn't it?
It would take into account anything that collects a sales tax, so even non-resident.
Kind of skew what
It will, but usually, and I've got many people in this room that can show that usually sales tax and occupancy tax kind of follow that same trend.
Yeah, why Rutland?
So in a prior year, we had visitors from Rutland that were spending a higher dollar value in Warren County than than other visitors. So we increased our tourism dollars to that area. So for example, I'm gonna pick a number because I don't remember what they said. Somebody from Albany will come here and spend $150 a day, and somebody from Rutland will spend $250 a day. So I'd rather encourage more visitors to spend $250, and that's what the Rutland visitor was showing at that time. So they weren't a large piece of our puzzle, but because they were spending more dollars, and that's what a lot of the analytics that we have is what my office will be using them for, is to find what I call that an opportunity market. It's a market that's not visiting us a lot, but spend a lot of dollars. So we want them here more than we want them to choose us more than another destination.
Okay,
Supervisor Stroud, did you have more to add?
yes, thank you. Where was I? Well, it says here spending on fuel, food and grocery declined. But we're also using just Visa, not Discover, not the other credit cards.
Correct.
And we're also using the mobile data. So is that, skewing certain age and cultural groups that might be showing some inaccuracies?
I always say with any data, use it for what it's looking at, and not for the holistic approach in it. And that's why it was important to include those highlights. You are correct that there's certain things that it's going to leave out in certain groups. I'd love to say that I'm going to buy everything, but unfortunately, as you continue to add more analytics on it, it doesn't become cost effective. You have to pick certain things and you have to be consistent with the measurements of it. And as time goes on, we may look at that data set and feel it's not accurate anymore because it's the particular economy or the particular user may switch out of that. But right now, I think that the Visa data is the more cost effective for us and provides us a better read at this time. Yeah.
With the understanding that even this data isn't representing the total picture. And as it was pointed out, some people that reserve their rooms online.
Yep.
aren't accounted for
Yeah.
anymore. So
Exactly. So I wouldn't recommend Vinny taking all of this data and looking at it from his location. But he can take this data and use it as information about the county as a whole.
Does anybody else have it? Go ahead. Supervisor Cressida.
I'm surprised to see the number on page 17 that Warren County's growth rate was behind upstate New York region. Any thought on why? I mean, my thought is that event driven? Is that the Olympics or that not the Olympics, but
I think a lot of it is Lake Placid is seen as a ski resort area. It's seemed as a place to go in the winter. It also includes some of the snowmobile areas, and it was a very big winter. And so that's also included in there. So there are because upstate New York, if you look at that map on that page, it's huge. It's so I almost don't want to say this, but we need to compare it to something that is pulled from this report. Going forward, we will more likely stay within our region or maybe compare to other certain areas. But that would be probably because of the other winter activities that other places provide. Being snow, there are some events that happen. Saranac has their ice sculptures up there. You've got the snowmobiling. Just has to do with
Sport.
comparison. Yes.
yes, Placid's got hockey tournaments, lacrosse tournaments, all of that, but that shows you that they're growing
Yeah. And it's
because of that.
comparing apples to apples.
It's not,
honestly,
but there's no
truthfully.
reason for us not to find a way to be able to compete with that.
100%. Yes. And we heard some of that during
Yeah.
the meeting with the stakeholders.
Yeah.
I think it would be important in the future if you had, each year you'd see trends though.
Yeah. And we'd be able to pull that out year over year trends.
Are there any other questions? I'll open the meeting up then to privilege of the floor. Does anybody wish to have any comments? Hearing none, then we'll do a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Scrivener, Supervisor Stroud. All in favor, say aye.
Oh, I'm not supposed to say.